And now, back to the handsome, effervescent, and humble Jordan J. Adams.
I am so excited about our guest today, Lex McMahon, the Chief Operating Officer and matchmaker of Titan FC. He has managed over 40 world-class fighters and champions, facilitated some of the largest deals in MMA history, including a huge license rights deal between Titan FC and UFC. He's promoted twice.
Twice. Get ready for a third one.
All right. He's promoted events in Kazakhstan, the Dominican Republic, and of course, as C.O.O, oversees all the day-to-day operations, is deeply involved with talent acquisition, relations. But he's worn all kinds of hats. That's what makes this guy so interesting. He's just done so many different types of things. He was president of operations for an international venture cap firm focused on technology investments, responsible for conducting all the due diligence of the emerging markets and investment opportunities. And then let's go way over on the quadrant, served as founder and CEO of a dietary supplement company that focused on the suppression of sugar cravings. He took the company from concept to clinical trials to brand architecture, then distribution to over 6,000 retail stores. Huge. And I would say now, perhaps most importantly, he served his country on the battlegrounds of Mogadishu, Somalia, during 2 deployments while in the U.S. Marines in the early 90s. And he also currently serves on the board of directors for A Hero and the Sean Brock Foundation. Oh my goodness. Just an amazing amount of activity that you crammed into just 24 years of life. Just.
It's amazing how I managed to make that happen. I'm telling you, my mom is actually younger than I am. It's pretty amazing.
Well said. Well said. Oh, buddy, I don't even know where to start with you, man. Your bio's so long. I knew if I kept going with it that I would, I'd run out of time to do the show. First, I guess right out of the gate, you're a West Coaster. You had a lot of opportunities. Why did you go into the Marines?
It's interesting. I went to Beverly Hills High School, and I was the first person from Beverly to join the Marine Corps since Vietnam. First one. And, I just felt it was the right thing for me at that time. It was an opportunity to do be a part of something larger than self. The Gulf War was very much on the horizon, and this was in August of 1990. I saw the handwriting on the wall and it just fit, man. Like, it just made sense to me, and I did it, and it was life-changing, and I'm so thankful that I did do it.
Yeah, it's remarkable, Lex. When you look at the kids in Beverly, and I lived in Los Angeles for a long time, I know who those kids are. They don't need to go into the Marines, and they certainly don't need to put themselves in harm's way. I mean, it's one thing.
I beg to differ. They all need to go.
Yeah, right.
A lot of them need to grow up. Yes, they're afforded a tremendous amount of opportunity. They're set for life in many cases. I mean, there's kids coming to school in Porsches and Ferraris and Bentleys and not being dropped off driving their own. So it's not reality. It's not real world. I still have some amazing friends that I'm very close with from that school, and I'm so thankful for them. But most of those guys were kind of like me, a bit of an outsider. Like, we made our way into Beverly, and because either our parent or, in my case, my mom, just busted her ass to get me into that, to live in that area, in a shitty little apartment on the wrong side of the Beverly Hills zip code, just so I could go to a great school. And a lot of my other friends, had similar circumstances, but we were all there, and I think we were all, we leaned on one another to kind of acculturate through that environment. And, we've all gone on to do some really cool things. And here 30 years later, we're still incredibly close.
Yeah, the realtors in Beverly call it Beverly Hills adjacent.
Yeah, that's
because they want to get that Beverly Hills. You say
that's right. That's right.
You
And
want to
when I
get that
say a
Beverly
shitty
Hills name,
apartment,
bro.
it was a shitty apartment.
Yeah, no, man. I know. I lived in the valley, so I am familiar with that. What the apartment was. It was a
Yep.
1940s bungalow with the
Hmm.
coil heat, and yeah, I'm very familiar, man. It was. I'm still traumatized off living in, off my time in the valley. But you got to pay your dues, bro. You want to be in
100%.
LA. You want to be. That's the city where everything's happening. The creativity. I'd be in the dry cleaner line. The dude behind me has a screenplay. The dude in front of me, directs Soldier with Kurt Russell. This is the dry cleaners, just
Yeah.
random. Whoever you meet is doing something.
Everybody's in the biz, man.
Everybody's in the biz, and it makes you up up your game, and you
Sure.
upregulate. You know what I mean? Because you got if you want to play, you're in with the big boys now. You got to up your game. And I mean
Sure.
it 3x'd me. My first 1 month in LA, it 3x'd me. I was so glad I did it. So glad I did. It was brutal, but I was so glad I did it. Um, so you put yourself in harm's way. You served two tours of duty, and I got to ask this, and you don't have to answer if you don't want, if it's an inappropriate question, but you're in the Marines, you're probably seeing action.
Yeah. There's nothing inappropriate. That's what we do. I
Okay.
mean, um, God created Marines to go fight battles and win victories and do it in places uh, that really are austere and incredibly unfriendly. That's why the Marine Corps exists. That's our job. We're not a group that goes and no offense to any other service, but we don't go and hold ground. We go and take it. Um, we get an extra probably 6 or so, in some cases 8 weeks of brainwashing. I mean, boot camp to develop a certain ethos and mentality and esprit de corps that help us to be able to go in harm's way and excel and thrive in that chaos.
We'll circle back because there's some the story really sweet, and so I'm going to tease everybody, about your family. So I'm going to just say the story gets really sweet, but I want to track your progression and see how you ended up in the MMA game. So let's visit one of the other hats that you wore, high tech investing. Usually you don't put the two, grunt and high tech Wall Street, together. Those two words don't seem to ever mix. How did you end up? And you weren't just coming in your ground level. You were vice president of international venture capital for these firms. How did you get into that?
Sitting in a dirt fighting hole in Somalia, making 12 grand a year, getting shot at, not having bathed in a month. I promised myself the best education I could possibly get. And when I left active duty, I made good on that promise. I went to the University of California, Santa Barbara, which, despite being an amazing party school and a beautiful environment, is a tremendous academic institution. And from there, I went to California Western School of Law, got my JD, and practiced for a few years, and then went on to get my executive MBA at Pepperdine, which was a top 20 school in the world. So really an amazing institution, and I think the tenacity that I learned in the Marine Corps of mission accomplishment at essentially any cost helped propel me forward. It gave me the understanding of digging deep to make things happen, and things kind of put themselves in the right position, and I worked hard and I was fortunate.
It's so inspirational, Lex. There's so many things I want to get to, because you, like I said, you worn so many different types of hats. By the way, my wife is a wave. Do you say a wave or a waver?
I believe it's a wave. Pepperdine
Okay,
Waves.
she's a wave.
Right.
So she says hi. She got her JD at Pepperdine as well. And when I went
Great
to visit
school.
her, I
Great
said, "How
campus.
the heck do you study? How do you study at Pepperdine? It's in Malibu. It's on the beach. Like, how do you study there?"
So Jay, listen, I went to university for undergrad, University of California, Santa Barbara, on the beach. Went to law school, Cal Western, down in San Diego, essentially right on the Embarcadero, right on the beach. and then Pepperdine for my executive MBA,
God.
on perhaps the most beautiful beach. Listen, if you're going to go to school and you're going to suffer, you might as well do it in a beautiful place.
That's right. That's right. Well, you did it. You did it well. You were able to take all that education and guide it and direct it and funnel it into all of these financial opportunities. One of the other opportunities that you saw and you grabbed was the dietary supplement industry. You're the founder and CEO of a company that was focused on the suppression of sugar cravings. You took this company from concept to clinical trials, to the brand architecture, and then to distribution to over 6,000 retail stores. Tell us all about that.
That actually came before I did the venture capital business. It was something that, and it's actually the reason I went and got my MBA, because as I was planning to sunset out of working at the law firm, I always knew I would never be a practicing attorney for long. It just wasn't something I wanted to do. But it was part of my strategy for, kind of positioning myself for long-term opportunities. As I was, getting ready to leave, I had this opportunity with someone who became one of my partners to take this concept and take it through clinical trials, do the brand architecture, do essentially everything from the very beginning, conceptually, all the way through execution and distribution, all through North America. And I was fortunate because the opportunity to get out was my partner. One of them was a woman who owned a massive company on the multi-level side, which is called Nu Skin, and talking billions upon billions of dollars, global multinational firm. And she kind of mentored me and helped me learn the business, and ultimately was my exit from the company, because she wanted to bring the product into Nu Skin as opposed to keeping it retail. There was a lot of opportunity, a lot less cost overhead associated with it. What people don't realize when you put a product into 6,000 stores is you're paying a lot of slotting fees, a lot of real estate, a tremendous amount of marketing to get the turn rate that you need to sustain that. Great product, great concept, and it was better served, frankly, to be on a kind of a multi-level product line. And it worked out great for me because it really was my baptism by fire. I learned so much about business, truly from the very early stages of a product all the way through launch, and then kind of taking it downstream and exit. Learned so much. And so when I finished that, I was looking at what was next. I was like, okay, I've got this kind of foundation of having been a Marine, which I use in everything I do. It's part of the fabric of who I am. I've got this amazing education, really top schools in the world across the board. Worked at a law firm that was a very prestigious law firm doing unfair trade practice litigation. Did that, now I'm an entrepreneur, was successful with that. And I'm sitting there trying to figure out what the next move was going to be. And it made sense to me that the way that I could bring all of those things together would be venture capital. And so that's how I ended up in the venture space, and how I kind of walked in, venture from never having been in it to walking into, a vice president's role.
Yeah, as I say, you didn't have to come in entry level. So obviously they were taking into account all of the other practices that you had already employed at that point. And so then first I want to ask, because did you get a nice parachute when you folded that into Nu Skin?
Listen, we did okay. Leave it at that. We did pretty good.
Inquiring minds want to know.
It wasn't a diamond parachute, but it was pretty
good for you, brother. Good.
What was next in life, that's for sure.
And next in line, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but next in line, you partnered up with Jeff Aronson and started. How did you make the transition from supplements and venture capital into mixed martial arts?
Yeah, life has a funny way of creating opportunities, and And what people don't understand, and I used to not talk about this, because it was something that I felt was a black eye on what had been a really good career. 2008 hit, financial markets around the world collapsed. I had 30 deals in the pipeline in my venture capital firm. I woke up the next morning and had none, lost 30 deals. It destroyed me financially. And I had to kind of begin over. And part of what I did was, and this is definitely the part that I, used to not tell, but now I wear as a badge of honor, because I think it speaks to true character. And in life, we all go through things, no matter how successful you are. The end of the day, very few people make it unblemished. Those who make it battered and bruised, because they've fought the battles, they've done the things necessary, they've learned the hard lessons, and I'm no different. I worked at during the day when I was like rediscovering who I was going to be, and applying to literally every job under the sun that made any kind of sense, because I was about to be married. I had a baby on the way, and frankly, I was scared shitless, because I was like, wow, I got all these responsibilities now, and all of a sudden, things which had been great aren't, from a financial perspective. So during the day, I did, I looked for any opportunity that made sense. At night, man, I was bouncing at a bar, taking advantage of the fact that I needed something that would give me flexibility, at nighttime. And I mean, I'm a big guy, and so it allowed me to not think while I was earning an income, so that during the day I could be sharp for interviews and for, kind of the due diligence necessary to kind of identify and attack an opportunity. And, I'm glad I went through that experience, because it's taught me so much about myself as a person, and how you can overcome obstacles. But it's also, helped me understand, man, you don't know when you come across somebody who they are, where they've been, where they're going. You could shake hands with, somebody at the door and, a bouncer at a bar maybe, right? You don't know. You think, oh, this guy's just bouncing in a bar. Probably not that bright. Probably doesn't have anything going on. Look, man, when I was bouncing in a bar, I had an MBA and a law degree. I'd already been, a successful entrepreneur, and already done a lot of things really well. Then life happened. And, then now fast forward, look at me, right? I've had success. I've rediscovered success. But if you would have looked at me at that moment in time and made a blanket assumption, you would have been wrong. And I think people do that all too often. So that's part of why I tell that story now. I want people to understand that across the board, man, we're all fallible. In fact, if you're not making mistakes, you're probably not trying hard enough.
Yeah, and I'm real excited to touch upon that. I'm tentatively calling this "Open the Cage," because I feel that all of us, have been down and out at some point, and I feel we also create a metaphorical cage around our possibilities. We lock ourselves into a cage, and kind of tying together the fighters who go into the cage, and that door locks behind you. You're locked in a cage, and until you can first know you're in a cage, because a lot of people don't even know they're in a mental cage. They don't even know that they're limiting themselves with their narrative, with the construct that is completely fabricated. It doesn't exist. Literally, thoughts don't exist. They're just clouds in the sky, and it keeps us all locked into this whatever your fabricated narrative is. Later in the show, I'm going to ask you to give us some actionable items, how you dug yourself out of the hole, out of the darkness. I had to do the same thing. I want to touch upon the fight itself, and that's a nice tease to keep everybody listening, that Lex isn't just, Lex has gone down like all of us, and what he's doing now is remarkable, and he's going to give you some actionable items on how, take some steps and some ordered steps to Get back in the light, man. Get back in the light. Titan FC. We'll come back to that. Titan FC, one of the biggest shows on the face of the planet. You guys, placing, I think you probably placed as much, maybe the most fighters into the UFC. I know you started off when you got into the MMA space, you were managing fighters. You had managed some of the top name fighters. How did you reconcile? I know there were some issues between management and promotion, where a lot of people were saying it's a conflict of interest because you got your own promotion and you're managing fighters. How did you reconcile those two different hats you're wearing?
Well, first off, I mean, I've done virtually every job you can do in the mixed martial arts industry. Everything to doing what you do exceptionally well in commentating, and commentating on our own shows, to doing endorsement deals, to negotiating media rights deals, to operations for a promotion, to managing athletes like you touched on. I've done it all. When Jeff and I began, backing up, we had grown Alchemist, which is our management company, into a very large company. And as you touched on, we had 40 plus of some of the biggest names in the world, complete A-listers, top 10 champions, you name it, we had them all. But man, I was gone all the time. I was gone 3 weeks out of the month, sometimes 6 weeks straight. I tell the story of one trip in particular where I flew from Fort Lauderdale to Macau, which is 32 hours. I was on the ground for 22, flew home, and with a layover, it was 36 hours. Was home for 2 days and flew to Hamburg for a week. And that was common. And I missed 5+ years of my young children's life. And that particular year, I missed everything. Every significant event and holiday, with the exception of Christmas. And that kind of got me to the point and plus I was just physically exhausted. It got me to the point where I felt like, I'm going to need to make a change. And I started vocalizing that with Jeff. And, the next thing you know, he said to me, he said, "Hey man, I've always wanted to buy a league." And I know that's the case because he actually tried to buy Strikeforce before the UFC and before Zuffa. And ultimately, you're not going to outbid the Fertitta brothers and Dana White. So he gracefully bowed out when he quickly realized who he was up against. But that was early on when we had started the management company. So, fast forward another 5 years or so, he still had the itch. He still really wanted to be a promoter and be involved in that side of the business. So the opportunity to acquire Titan presented itself. It was originally based in the Midwest, and had done some good shows. It had a little bit of television distribution, but not much. But it had some good fighters that had fought on the show at that point. So, there was some value in the brand. Jeff said, "Let's buy it." I said, "Okay, great." And he said, "I want you to run it." I said, "Okay, great." And we began winding down because I was just so tired of traveling all the time, the management side of things. And, began to understand that there was an inherent conflict in managing athletes and being a promoter. So, the way I've dealt with it, I do still manage several fighters. Stefan Struve, notably, Jose Shorty Torres, Brendan Schaub, although Brendan does not fight, obviously, anymore, but he is segued into the entertainment world and podcasting.
Quite nicely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing 20 million downloads a month, buddy. Let's talk about that and getting that monetized. So I still work with him a lot. And, he's, one of my longest, clients. But the way I've dealt with the conflict is I get asked all the time by fighters to manage them that fight for me. And I always say no. Shorty Torres asked me, because I found him in Bahrain when he was an amateur, who's definitely ready to go pro and make a splash. I said, I signed him to Titan, and he said, "Okay, great, but I want you to sign me or manage me." And I said, "Man, I just can't do it. It's inherent conflict." I said, "But I'll make you a deal. If you move on to the next level, I'll do everything I can to promote you and build you as a promoter should. If you move on to the next level, then I'll take over and manage you. That removed the conflict for me, because when he did go on to the UFC, and I'm the one who put him in the UFC, because I just called, when it was time, I said, hey, he's ready, and the UFC agreed. And, next thing you know, he was, fighting for his life and getting dumped on his head and still coming out with a victory. But, that's really the way that I've handled it. Is I don't manage anybody who fights for me or is going to fight for me. I try to run a very boutique agency with only a handful of represented clientele. And, the rest I'm focusing in on promoting fights and new business ventures. Not today. So I'm going to tease you a little bit, Jay. I am going to be announcing a new project really soon that's going to be super exciting, and it will keep me in the combat sports world as well. So,
Wow.
Just something else in addition to what we're doing at Titan. I love Titan. Titan's my baby, and Jeff and I have invested a tremendous amount of resources and time and energy into it and growing it. So that's not going anywhere, but new things are coming.
Oh man, we got to break it right now. Let's break it, man. Let's break it. Come on. Let's break the
Jeff
news.
would probably break me. He would probably break me.
Hey, tell us a little bit about Jeff. We had mentioned him earlier. He's longtime friends with Jeff, and he's just a monster, isn't he?
Yeah, Jeff is. I mean, he's a guy who's a serial entrepreneur. I've known Jeff and been partners with Jeff for almost 12 years. I met Jeff. I negotiated a contract with my dad for my dad to appear in a Super Bowl commercial alongside MC Hammer. And during the course of the negotiations, Jeff and I, became friendly and had a good rapport. And we actually filmed the commercial at my dad's house. Sorry, buddy.
Oh, no worries.
My children's school is calling me.
Is it an emergency?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
All right.
It's one of those calls that's like, we just wanted to let you know that it's very important that Broward County has your support. No.
Oh, yeah. I'm familiar.
Yeah. But anyway, he and I were sitting at the craft services table talking the day they were filming the commercial, and we started talking about fights. And, we both had a real passion for it. It was pretty obvious. Hammer did as well, actually, and I didn't know this at the time, but Hammer had managed Evander Holyfield. And he had, a lot of experience dealing with athletes as he was growing and diversifying what he was doing from a business perspective. But anyway, so the commercial goes great, goes on to become, the most successful commercial, I think, that year. And, a few months later, I get a message from Jeff. Hey, I want to start sponsoring fighters with my company. And I said, I'm Marine. I don't say no. I mean, I'm like, sure, man, of course. And I'm like, how the hell am I going to do this? I found a way to get to Randy Couture. And at the time, Randy was, he was the biggest star in the sport.
Totally.
And, obviously a Hall of Famer now, but he was massive at that particular time. And I went to him and I said, Randy, I got a check for you. It's going to be a pretty big check, and I just need you to put this logo on your fight shorts, and we'll call it a day. And that began my kind of it was almost my apprenticeship in the sport, because I spent a year writing checks. And when you're writing checks, everybody in the sport wants to know you. It's just the way this sport is geared. It's you become very popular very quick, including with the UFC. So I got to know everybody very fast because I was a guy writing checks, and they were big checks. This is at the time when sponsorships were, a huge part of an athlete's overall income profile.
Before Reebok, yeah.
Way before. This is we're talking where a guy was getting $15,000 or $20,000 for a T-shirt for a fight.
Wow.
And that's uncommon.
That is a game changer for these kids. They don't have two dimes to rub together. So yeah.
No, that market has changed significantly. But when I was first starting out in the handling the sponsorships for Jeff, it was the Wild West. And so you could really get some crazy things done. And, but anyway, Jeff and I did that for about a year. And, one day I just said, man, I was looking at it through my business lens. And I said, bro, I feel like there's a real opportunity at the time. There wasn't a tremendous amount of business acumen within the athlete representatives. It was a lot of moms, dads, boyfriends, girlfriends, bail bondsmen, strippers, friends, there wasn't real agents. It didn't exist. Unlike, MLB, NFL, NHL, NBA, that all have players associations, and all mandate that you have a master's degree or higher level of education or get an exemption, which is very difficult to get. And you have to pass a test and have a background investigation. MMA doesn't have that. Still doesn't have it. Doesn't exist. So there was a real opportunity for some, a group that had those things. And, Jeff has a master's degree as well, and has been a very successful entrepreneur and marketer. So I said to him, I said, man, there's this opportunity. I think we should start representing athletes. And he just laughed. And I said, why are you laughing, man? He goes, why do you think I had you doing this for the past year? I wanted you to make the contacts, learn the business. This is what I really want to do. We should do it. And, but let's get Hammer involved. And so we did. So, here I am, 2009, partners with MC Hammer and, Jeff Aronson.
Wow.
It's definitely, Jeff and I are like brothers, in a lot of respect. There have been days that we've battled it out, and literally on a boat where we got into physical altercation, and he threw me into the water while we were shark fishing and had chum in the water, and I got out of the boat and punched him right in the face.
Wow.
We fight like brothers, At the end of the day, we have one another's back. We've been through a tremendous amount, ups and downs together, personally, professionally, you name it, man. We've been through it, and we've been partners, for 12 years. When you're partners with somebody that long, you really know a lot about them. And if it wasn't for Jeff Aronson, I wouldn't have the opportunities that I have today. He believed in me. He saw that I had the drive and the talent and the intellect to create something special, and he empowered me to do it, and then added his own elements to it. And and he and I go back and forth all the time. He's an incredibly busy guy. I mean, he's had so many successful companies, and now he and his wife are running It's a 10, which is a massive multinational firm. They're in the midst of their international launch now. And I mean, when I tell you, I couldn't even begin to tell you how big it is, but let's just say they just bought a house on Star Island. Like, it's big, it's a testimony to hard work, because Carolyn, when she started the company, was a hairdresser, a stylist, salon and selling product. You there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Jack?
Can you hear me?
I think my headphones died, buddy. We're going to have to go without them.
I can still hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes, I can.
But anyway, she was she's kind of that John Paul Mitchell story. She was selling, product out of the back of her car, man. So it's an amazing story. And Jeff, they came together and formed kind of this uber power couple. They have several companies on their own, but they also come together and form several companies. They just formed a record label that's already launched its first artist and doing great. So, I mean, Jeff is he's a serial entrepreneur, and, he puts his money where his mouth is and gives it a shot. And if it works, great. And if not, he's a big boy, and he takes it and moves on to the next thing.
Wow. So one of the things you guys did so well, when you first picked up Titan FC, I believe out of Kansas.
Yeah.
They had a CBS deal.
We did.
We
actually put the deal in place. They didn't have a deal. We put it in place.
You put the CBS deal in place. At some point, you made the decision that it would be better to play in the sandbox with the UFC rather than try to go head to head. And you did, as you said, a couple times, you did the Fight Pass deals with the UFC. How's that worked out for you?
It's been great, man. I mean, Dana is and has been a great partner. His team at Fight Pass is continued to grow. I mean, they had some times where they're trying to figure out what Fight Pass was going to be, especially as they were going through the ESPN deal and the ESPN Plus and their obligations there. What kind of content was going to be resident on Fight Pass versus resident on ESPN Plus. But as Dana, we just finished our second deal. I'd been out there and I'd taken him a bottle of tequila to say thanks. And, we sat and had lunch and a few drinks together in his office. By the way, coolest office I've ever been in. I've been times over the years. It is the coolest office I've ever been in.
Was this the one on Sahara or the one on the 215?
So both of them, because he essentially replicated. The new one is just even bigger. It's got this amazing bar, and it's 3 rooms. One room is this amazing bar. The middle room, he doesn't have a desk. He doesn't have a computer. He just has like a bunch of couches and like a dining room table. And he does his meetings sitting on the couches. And, he'll bring lunch in and sit and do meetings at the table. And then he's got a gym that's massive. That's the 3rd room. But he's just got so many amazing pieces of art in his office. That's what gives it character and makes it cool. You just walk in and you're like, wow, this is incredible. But anyway, Dana, he was always a gentleman to me in terms of us structuring deals and getting things done. And so anyway, this is typical quintessential Dana. I said, shot him a message after I'd gotten back from Vegas and that lunch. And, we'd kind of finished and finalized everything with the contract. And I said, hey, boss, just wanted to, send you a note to say thanks, man. Really appreciate it. I believe in Fight Pass and what it represents, the opportunity that it affords the athletes. And his response to me was, Lex, we're really fucking behind Fight Pass. It's gonna happen. It's gonna get big because I'm behind. And that's Dana. With all the superlatives and the colorful language, that's Dana. And he's behind Fight Pass. It's growing. I have more meetings with them, taking new products to them. There's a lot of opportunity that's going to be coming up, and I think it's still an incredible value proposition for the fan.
Absolutely, it's short money. I mean, for the sheer volume of content, the sheer volume of replays. I've been on it a long time. I love it. And that's where I watch my Titan when I'm doing my research.
There you go.
And I like what you guys do too. And showing love to the UFC and showing that it's reciprocal. Unlike a lot of other promotions, if a fighter gets an offer from the UFC, you have a Zuffa out clause, which immediately allows them to move on and move up to the UFC. Does that help you attract even better talent?
Yeah, of course it does. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, I get guys and gals that are really top-tier talent that are a fight away, maybe 2 fights away. And, they'll come fight for me. And, frankly, I can get them at a rate that maybe I couldn't normally afford because of their talent level. But they know that, they don't have to be locked down, that if they're close, they're going to get the opportunity to leave. And more than anything, I've developed a reputation over the years as being someone who advocates for his fighters. So my approach is that I work in conjunction with the fighter's representative, or I go rogue and do it on my own. It's been known to happen where I just call Dana and sit down with him and I'll be like, look, you got to sign this dude. And I have a highlight package put together and I send it to him, or I sit down with him and show him on my phone. And, we've signed, we were just looking at the other day, well over 120 fighters to the UFC.
Wow.
Many of those fighters have come from me calling directly. Volkan Ozdemir, great story, right? Actually never fought for Titan. Slated to fight for Titan like 3 times. And he kept having one kind of disaster after another. Like fight day, his opponent ends up being pulling out of the fight, an hour before they're supposed to fight. just all kinds of different things. And finally, it was 2 days before I believe he was fighting either a title contender fight or an actual title fight. And I called the matchmaker, I believe it was Mick Maynard, and I said, Mick, I see you got some movement going on, and you've got some openings where you need to fill a space. I'm telling you, you got to sign this kid Vulcan, man. I see him train every day. He's a monster. He's supposed to fight me in a couple days, but you need him, and you need to take him and not have him fight and just take him down. And they did. And Vulcan has been very vocal since he was signed, and giving us some credit for that. And so I'm appreciative. I don't seek it. At the end of the day, I do it because I want these guys to have the opportunity. I think that understanding your role in the environment is important, in the ecosystem. And Titan's role in the ecosystem is we're teeing up the next superstar for the UFC. Like, that's our role. I have zero issue. In fact, I take pride in it. We're not going to be we're not going to beat the 800-pound gorilla. I mean, that's why we made the decision, when we did, not to go head to head with them, but rather to align ourselves with them. And it's worked out great. We didn't, initially we didn't have a deal with them, but we still took that approach, and stars aligned and opportunities presented themselves, and been partners with them for 5 years, going into our 6th year, and we've got I think a new opportunity for a contract to come up, and within the next 12 months or so, and I think we'll probably sign the new deal way before that 12 months comes, because we're already in those discussions.
Yeah, in the end, the business is to make money, and you do the math and you figure out, if you go head to head with the 800-pound gorilla, they crush you, you get your ass handed to you, or you could team up and create synergy and help fighters and grow fighters, and like you say, put change over 100 fighters' lives. I mean, in the end, you're a military guy. In the end, look at that. You changed 100 kids' lives for the positive. That game changer, the biggest, probably the best memory of their life, maybe short of a marriage or a birth of a child, is making it into the UFC. You helped over 100 people achieve that dream and making money at the same time. I applaud you, and of course, like when you said, I'm proud of it. Yeah, damn straight.
Sure.
We had that fun night where Dana and Matt Serra came to your show.
Yep.
And they were filming that show, Looking for a Fight, which I freaking love. And they came in, and the big fighter they were looking at the time was Jason Suarez, who was undefeated and fighting in the main event. And everybody was thinking Suarez was getting signed that night.
At the time, he was 12-0. He had probably 350 people, 400 people there just for him. The house was rocking. Everybody, and I thought he was. How about this? I thought he was getting signed because I'm the one who had Dana come out, because I sat there again with my phone. I'm like, Dana, look at this guy. All these great. I showed him the highlight reel finish of Kyle Uruguay and some of his other great fights, and Dana's like, yeah, man, let's do it. I love it. And Jason didn't have a great performance initially, but because he was, his style, he was kind of like a Ben Askren, grinding him out, but dominating. But just, it wasn't exciting. But then, he got caught. He got put on his backside. And then he came back and he finished the fight. And I thought, you know what? Because Sean Shelby has told me in the past, when I talked to him, he'd rather see a fighter, or he prefers to see a fighter go through adversity before he brings them to the UFC. Because in the UFC, they will go through adversity. There is no question. So he wants to know how they're going to respond. So when I saw Jason go through that adversity and come out the other side and on the biggest stage possible in front of the boss, like I just told his manager, I said, hey man, just get Jason, bring him in the back. I'll meet you guys back there. I swear to God, I was like done. And then I'm talking to Dana and he's like, hey, I want Herbert Burns and Rafael Alves. I was like, awesome. I said, I leaned in. I'm like, what about Suarez? He goes, not tonight, man. I was like, okay, and he's the boss, and
he's the boss.
He's the boss. I didn't see it the way he did, but he's the one running a a $10 billion company, and I'm not. So
Right. Well, we all had called it. I said on the air, congratulations, Jason, on your UFC contract. Kamaru said, congratulations on your UFC. We're all congratulating the guy. It's like, what else do you have to do? But hey, like you said, it is what it is. And when he does make it, it'll be that much more, it'll be that much more fulfilling. It's even more adversity. Now, this is just one more test, and it's just one more layer of adversity for him to overcome. It's just like the knee that he caught, but now it's a mental test. It's a psychological test. It's a spiritual test. And now he's got to overcome that.
Right.
And he's strong, man. He's mentally strong. And when he does, and I'm sure everyone else is knocking on the door anyway for him, So, yeah. Well, you had mentioned earlier, because this is one of my favorite things to say, because it always makes everybody say what? You'd mentioned your dad and the commercial you did. And yes, that last name is very famous, and for a good reason. Your dad's Ed McMahon, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
And that commercial was killer. There was
Yeah.
something about that commercial that just caught the two generations.
Yep.
Right? The gold product. It's a cash for gold commercial that ran during the Super Bowl and blew up everything. Tell us all about it. It's such a great story.
Yeah, I mean, listen, again, this is, when I was going through everything, because this is when everybody was going through everything financially. Like, it's 2008 into 2009. The financial markets were upside down. People truly were, losing their house, their home, or their car. I mean, you name it, everything. And they were looking for ways to get cash and get cash quick. And Jeff came up with this concept of, send in your gold jewelry. We'll have it evaluated and we'll send you back a check right away. And they marketed it through direct marketing, through infomercial. But they did it with a Super Bowl ad. It had never been done before like that. And they brought in, my dad and MC Hammer, who both actually went through financial problems, famously. Both made billions upon millions upon millions of dollars, and both struggled financially at some point in their career. The timing of it, to have those two iconic figures as kind of representatives or spokespersons for the everyday person going through the everyday issue, was brilliant. It really was. And so it resonated with people. And it was just funny, man. There were some great commercial aspects to it. Like, one of the things was the very closing shot, or at one point, Hammer is got hammer pants on, and he's on the stairway, and he's saying, "I could send my gold record in," and he's got this gold, one of his many gold records. I mean, he sold 50 million albums. I mean, he had gold records. And then another one was, there was a golden toilet sitting on my dad's desk, and he put his arm on it and he said, "So long, old friend." And it was just it's the perfect ending. It was a great commercial, man. It was great. And Jeff hired this amazing production company to come in and shoot it and do it. And he hold on. He was bright, man. He did it again too with another great commercial for It's a 10. I think it was 2 years ago in the Super Bowl. There's something about being in front of the largest audience in the world at any given time. If you've got the right product and the right commercial, you can really hit it out of the park. And he's done it twice.
Wow. What a monster. I encourage everybody to go. Can people see that on YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I encourage everybody to check out that commercial. It's just one of those moments in time. There's something about the generational difference and the two of them going back and forth in rapid succession, all the different gold things that they're going to send in, that just made me laugh out loud. And I'm sure that's why it did so well, because it just, like you say, it's almost like kismet, where it's the perfect storm. The two personalities and the two generational differences, they couldn't be more polarly opposite in a lot of ways, and yet here they are as brothers saying, "I got to send my gold in. I'm going to send my gold in." It was really, really, it was just a special moment. And so, I mean, it just cracked me up. Tell us a little bit about your dad. When you and it's well known. I mean, the story of when you were in the Marines and you got a phone call from your mom. Now, I was in the service. No one gets phone calls in boot camp. Nobody. No, it does not happen. And yet your CO says, "Hey, you get a phone call." What went through your mind when you're in boot camp in the Marines?
Well, I mean, just go backtrack just a tad, and I understand. Like, my mom was 14 when she had me. She was, and she tells her own story, and she's working on platform for that. But essentially, her dad sold her to a drug lord, and took the money. And at 14, she was in the desert in Arizona with a 3-month-old child. And whether my dad ultimately died or is in prison, I don't know. Don't care. Never, ever been a part of my life or a thought. Because at 3 months old, she ran away because when I was 3 months old, she ran away from him. And she's only 14. And she grabbed, I think she said she had $300. She was able to get off like the nightstand. I mean, this guy was 36, and she said there was just like containers of marijuana and cocaine everywhere. And she's like, man, something bad's going to happen. And she just knew it, and she had to get out of there. And he had made her a drug mule. She was ferrying drugs all over the country at 14 years old because he had me. And if she didn't do it, he could have done something to me. And it's just an incredible story of tenacity and perseverance, and love, because how she was able to extricate us out of that environment. And whatever happened to him, man, who cares? Because fast forward now, and we'd grown up together. She had struggled, Beverly Hills adjacent, to have me in the right school to have the best opportunity for success and betterment. I'm in the Marines and boot camp, and she was working as, I want to say, like a retail salesperson at a store in Beverly Hills. And one of the affluent women who would come into the store befriended her. And, my mom was this, gorgeous young woman. And she says, I got a guy I want you to meet. You're going to really like him. And it was Ed McMahon. And she goes on the first date. They have a blast. They go on a second date that night. And fast forward a few weeks, and she calls me and she says, hey, and this is, the phone rings in Marine Corps boot camp, and in the senior drill instructor's hut, and he sticks his head out. He says, recruit, report, you've got a phone call. I'm flying up. Sorry, report to duty, sir. Just who the hell's calling? I thought for sure he goes, your mother's on the phone, and I was just like, sir. He's like, I don't know who you are, but you're going to pay for this once you get off this phone call.
Oh, no.
And I was like, holy crap, man. And in my mind, I was like, holy shit. So they died.
Yeah.
That's the only way I'm getting a phone call. And if you know my mom, this next part would make sense. She said, oh, hi, honey. How are you? I was like, I'm okay, Mom. What's going on? She's, oh, no, nothing like that. Listen, you're graduating in a week or two, and I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to be bringing my new boyfriend. I'm like, holy cow, are you kidding me? I get trashed for this, and you're calling to tell me about your new boyfriend? I'm like, I don't care. She's like, no, honey, like, it's important because, he's somebody famous, and I would rather you know than not know, and I don't want to surprise you. And I was like, all right, Mom. Like, I was like, screw it. I mean, I'm going to be doing push-ups for the next 2 weeks. What do you got, Mom? Who's your boyfriend? I'll indulge you at this point because the outcome is going to be the same. She goes, well, it's Ed McMahon. And, Ed was this iconic television personality. But, man, I just spent 11 weeks in Marine Corps boot camp. So I had learned about all the famous Marines. And so I said, oh, my God, do you know he's a colonel in the Marine Corps? And also a general in the National Guard, which, most people did not know.
I did not know that.
Even though he was a general in the National Guard, he always talks about being a colonel in the Marine.
Wow.
And because the general thing, I think, was honorific, but nonetheless, he earned that.
General is general, man. Yeah.
He earned that full bird, and he wore it proudly. But anyway, so when I first met him was I graduated company honor man, and my family was entitled to be in the commanding general's box on the parade field or parade deck for graduation. Ed would have been in there anyway, but all my friends and family got to be there too. And after we graduated, I had the opportunity to come up and shake the sergeant major's hand and the general's hand. And next thing you know, I'm meeting Ed McMahon, and my mom's like, "You're my new boyfriend," and I'm like, "Huh, okay." I'm that sort of woman who at 14, living with a drug lord and, was a mule and running, through the deserts of Arizona trying to get away.
Dude, I'm seeing a movie.
Because I think it's a tremendous testament to belief in self, love, because if she didn't love me enough to sacrifice and put at risk everything, we would never have gotten out of there. And, she stayed true to those kind of beliefs and did everything she could to put me in the best environment throughout our days growing up. And there was times, man, like I was the typical latchkey kid. We had all kinds of really strange characters living in our house because my mom had to have 9 people as roommates so we could make it. And but she did it, and eventually she met Ed, and he was truly the love of her life. And he took care of her and gave her an amazing kind of Prince Charming sort of life. And it was incredible. And he ultimately ended up becoming my dad because he truly was the only dad I ever knew.
I'm floored at this story. I mean, I'm sure 100 different people have told you at different times, especially as a West Coaster, this needs to be a movie. It does, bro. It has everything. And not just, all the danger and the elements and the drama of, being a mule, and then all of the stardom of one of the biggest, most famous guys in the world. You have all that, which is enough right there to make a movie. But underneath it all, undergirding it, is the sub-narrative of the love and the sub-narrative of the giving everything you have to get your kid out of this, like risking everything. And how do you do that as a 14-year-old? The wisdom, the presence of mind as a 14-year-old, not just this 36-year-old who has so much power over you, not to just be like terrified and like, yes, sir, and never get out because your brain, because you know what happens, the brain, that they say like that. I don't know if you're familiar with the Sweden study. There was a study about authority and how you can once you've got somebody that once you have that authority over them, it's almost like a hypnotic state.
That's the Stockholm syndrome.
That's what I was looking for, the Stockholm syndrome. And
Patty
for her not right, famously. Right, exactly. For her not to have been, all the Manson girls, for her not to have fallen into that is a testimony to her brain, to her power of will.
She's incredible, an incredible woman. And listen, we grew up together and, more brother and sister than mother and son in a lot of ways. And I don't say that as a pejorative because it's not, we were basically the same age in a lot of respects. And so we had to depend on one another growing up. And, so we've had our ups and downs, but every time I've thought about, every time I'm like, I can't, I'm pissed off at my mom for something, that's just life, right? There's always emotion involved in things. And so there's been times when I've been upset with her. And I always think back to what it was like in that moment, make that decision. Or how at 14, when she first had me, she could have either aborted me or put me up for adoption. Because how can, at 14, even contemplate being a parent? I look at my 11-year-old daughter now. That's only 3 years away. It's not remotely fathomable.
My daughter is 11. It's not even in the zip code.
Every time I'm a little chapped with my mom, or I think, oh, how could you do that, Mom? What? I always go back to that place, and I always realize what an incredible woman she is, and how much I love her, and how thankful I am that she never gave up on me.
God. I couple quick things. I want to be very sensitive to your time. I know what a busy man you are. There's 2 or 3 things I wanted to touch on. Do you have a little more time?
Of course, Dave. Whatever you need, buddy.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you very much for that. You have given back very generously of your time to people who have served in the military and may find themselves in a dark place. I had to find a protocol for myself to work my way out of very dark times. And I'm very thankful
Me
to
too,
you, and I'm thankful to people who extend their hand out, because when you're desperate, when you're dark, man, like the external almost doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your external is. Like you look at Robin Williams, his external was awesome, right? He had all the money in the world. Everybody on the planet loved him. Had this amazing life, was beloved, and yet hung himself in a closet. When you're dark, man. When you're dark, you're dark. It does not matter what's going on the outside. It's desperation time. You have given your time to 2 different organizations very generously. One is A Hero, and the other is the Sean Brock Foundation. Could you tell us a little bit about those foundations and how people might be able to contribute if they feel so inclined?
Yeah, well, the Sean Brock Foundation, I'll start there. Sean was one of my fraternity brothers, who was a reserve Marine, and after graduation from college, received his commission, and was one of the best Marines I've ever met. Like, truly incredible. And he deployed to Iraq, and he was in the head and got blown up by a rocket. Basically cut him in half. He was such an infantry Marine. As an enlisted Marine, he had one super squad, which is in the Marine Corps, is like the most elite of the infantry Marines win this. It's a squad level competition. The most elite group of infantrymen are honored with, the opportunity to compete, and then really the cream of the cream are named winner. Sean won that as an enlisted Marine. Then became a Marine officer, always led from the front. So when he was killed, his Marines did everything they could to give him a warrior's ending, as opposed to dying on the bathroom. They couldn't wrap their head around that. That's how their leader, who was like King Leonidas himself, could go out like that. So they tried to take him outside the wire and have it be an incident that occurred while he was on patrol. There's a couple different things. And so when we first found out about Sean, we were hearing all these different stories about how, and we attributed it to the fog of war. The lines of communication are coming back. They're, getting third-hand, fourth-hand, fifth-hand information. Because we kept hearing, oh, he was hit by a sniper. Oh, he was, they came under fire because he was killed at Camp Ramadi, in Al-Anbar province, and or Camp Blue Diamond, which is in Ramadi. But some of the reports was that he was on a patrol by Fallujah and fire, and he led his Marines into clearing a house, and he was killed by an insurgent. And then another report came in that the same scenario, but that he was killed by one of his Marines accidentally. Just so many different narratives came out, and it wasn't the fog of war. It was just his Marines trying to give him the proper send-off, and they didn't want him to die that way. pants around his ankles, crap. That's how he died. But Sean was an amazing guy. So the Sean Brock Foundation was started by a group of his friends to perpetuate his name and his legacy by offering scholarships. Because Sean was already working on his second master's degree and had plans for a PhD. He believed in education, and he believed it was a great way of advancement. And so the Sean Brock Foundation looks to help service members and their children advance their education levels. It's a great organization. It's something that I am on the board with, and I have been for a very, very long time. I don't get to spend as much time as I would like because it's really a West Coast based organization, and I do a lot from here and reach out and support and raise awareness and funds and all that. And it's certainly near and dear to my heart because Sean was one of my very dear friends. But the other organization, one that I'm incredibly engaged in, is one that I get to touch a lot more regularly. And that has an incredible story too. AHERO, it stands for American Heroes Enjoying Recreation Outdoors. It was founded by a Marine major by the name of Lee Stuckey. Lee was an enlisted Marine as well. He was a student at Auburn, sergeant in the Marines, got called up, his reserve unit got called up, took part in the Second Battle of Fallujah, ended up doing 3 tours in Iraq after he got commissioned, blown up a bunch of times. Ultimately, in one 30-day period, he lost 24 Marines. That was in 2009, some very difficult fighting. And ultimately, he was sitting at his desk or his table, and I use a prop, which was the phone. And he had his phone sitting face up, a bottle of Jack Daniels, and his 45. The bottle of Jack Daniels was empty. He put the 45 in his mouth, started pulling the trigger. The phone rang, and it said "Mama" across the front. He put the gun down, started crying, picked up the phone, told his mom what he was about to do. And she said, "Baby, you got to come home. Let me love you. Let me take care of you. Let me help you heal." So he took leave and went home. And he spent a lot of time. He's from rural Alabama. So he spent a lot of time hunting and hiking and fishing. And he did it with veterans of Korea, Vietnam, the first Gulf War, fellow veterans from Afghanistan and Iraq. And he found it very cathartic. And he said, man, if I'm a Marine Corps captain, kind of like Superman, supposed to be just this battle-hardened, warrior. And if I'm struggling and this is helping me, maybe it'll help others. He called me and he said, "Man, I need help." I said, "All right." Since then, we've had over 6,500 either active military or veterans come through our programming. We've raised well over $1 million and put every dime of that to use. It's an entirely volunteer-based nonprofit. 94 cents on every dollar goes directly to the warfighter that comes through our programming. We're in the midst of building a massive 5,300 square foot lodge on our property up in Alabama, just outside of Auburn, where we can bring folks in to do hunting and enjoy the outdoors, but also to, sit and take classes and just have a retreat with their family. And you name it, this facility will, I think, be a great focal point. We're breaking ground on that on March 7th. So that's coming up, and that's the realization of a lot of dreams, and hard work. But we have, of those 6,500 folks that have come through, I've had about 300 or so people tell me I was going to kill myself had I not come on this. I've now had the opportunity to connect with like-minded people who understand me. I feel like I've got my team again. Because what we do is every time there's an event, and say we bring 20 people in for an event, whoever's in charge of that event creates a text chain. And it's for logistics. Hey, make sure you bring this. so-and-so is going to pick you up at this time, meals are at this time, just all the logistics stuff. And it allows us to communicate during the event. But really, the true value in it is these guys are able to walk away with a group of 20, 30, 40. We've had a group, an exercise of 90 people that they got to connect with, they got to talk to, they got to open up to, bond with. Because a lot of people, when they come back, transition out of the military, especially in a time of war, is very hard. It's what people struggle with most commonly, because the military, as you know, Jay, is all about team. And you've got your team, and you make it through some really adverse circumstance because of team. You come back, and now all of a sudden you're in the middle of rural wherever you're from, or your city wherever you're from, and you don't have your team, and people can't relate to you. And so that's where darkness begins to take a lot of these guys and gals, and where they suffer. But we give them their team back just by a simple text message chain. So it's a powerful organization. I was just in Alabama this past weekend with my daughters, spending some time with Lee Stuckey, our founder, planning out some of the things for future, and both of us talking about, even now, how we struggle. Lee has, he was blown up a bunch of time and has traumatic brain injury and PTSD and, a litany of other issues. But he's an active duty major, and he's, in charge of 3,000 plus people. He's super successful at what he does, and but still struggles. And, I've been fairly vocal about my struggles and how, my 2 tours in Somalia almost broke me, but then redefined me and have served as a source of strength. But I still fight. The battle didn't end on the street of Mogadishu in the Bakara market. The battle rages every night when I try to go to bed. It rages when I'm in a crowded place and I hear a noise. And for me in particular, it's smell. Somalia smelled like death and decay, because people were literally dying on the streets of famine and gunfights, and people were left to rot. And so it's just this god awful smell of death. If I smell anything remotely like that, I'm right back. I'm 19 years old again. I'm sitting behind a 60, on the back of a Humvee, fighting for my life.
They're a tremendous partner.
But if you don't talk about those things, if I were to not take advantage of the platform that I have, through all the hard work and the opportunities and guys like you reaching out and saying, hey, let's come on and talk, I would be failing in my duty, in my responsibility to help other people. Man, I made a shit ton of money. I've lost it, made more. None of that matters. What matters is the legacy that I'm going to leave as somebody who cares, who has compassion, empathy, who wants to lift his brothers and sisters up. If I can do that, then I'll be able to look my girls in the eye and know that I was a good person, and they'll know it too. And hopefully they'll aspire to do similar things. And if, as a group of people, as a society, we can all endeavor to do things like that, we'll be better off, man. You won't see all the bullshit that you see now. You certainly see a lot less of it.
You are one of the most compelling guys I know, bro. And at a couple of your fights, much to my surprise, when you would get in the cage and you would share and break down out of the beauty of what you were sharing, you just devastated me. And now I've got to go and continue on. Like me and Kamaro are looking at each other like, how do we even talk now? Why does he do this? We're trying to do a show. We're looking at each other like there's no way we can keep going. It's so pure and so beautiful, and it's such a guideline for all of us. Like that, the heart of your mom. It's like choosing life over death. It's choosing light over dark. And she passed that on to you. And now you're passing that on to your kids. Lex, we talked earlier about some actionable items for people who might be listening to this, who might be relating to what you're saying right now. What would you say? And I picked the random number of 5 actionable items, but whatever the number is, what would you say are the 2, 3, 4 most important things for a warrior of any stripes? And you don't have to be in the military. What you could go dark without having been in the military. If you're not happy, if you're depressed, if you're going dark, what are the 3 or 4 most important things to do to start getting closer to the light?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the question, Dan. I'll tell you, when we have, during the course of the event that we do at A Hero, and I go to as many of them as I possibly can, to act as a mentor, to be a facilitator, to make sure that the folks that are there in our programming are getting the right experience. At some point towards the end, it's not quite at the end because I want there to be time to further engage on it, but I want there to have been enough time for people to have really had a great experience, right? So maybe it's the night before the last day, because typically our events are 3 to 4 days. So there's an opportunity for real bonding to occur. So maybe it's on that, and we typically do like a big barbecue or some big event. I'll gather everybody together and I'll say, hey man, did you have a great time? Was this beneficial to you? Everybody's, yeah, it was awesome. Thank you so much. Great. I said, okay, you've got a couple of takeaways. I said, first, you must, and this is applicable as one of your action items, you must know your love. Because without love, there is no reason. There's no reason to go on. There's no reason to work hard. There's no reason to do anything. If you don't know that you're loved, it's hard to love yourself. If you don't love yourself, you can't really do anything, right? You don't have the capacity to love others if you don't love yourself. And the darkness becomes pretty consuming. So I always say, know that you're loved. Second is to help others. Perpetuate this concept of giving back, because what I've learned is through the giving back, the greatest healing occurs. I've been a part of almost 65 or over 6,500 different warriors, including Medal of Honor recipients like Kyle Carpenter and so many just amazing war heroes come through. I've heard their stories. I've heard their struggles. And here I am just trying to give them a great time and experience, right? And help them heal. And what I soon realized was by engaging with them, sitting back and listening to them, my issues came into a clear relief, and I began to understand them better. I felt better about where I was in dealing with my personal struggles. Because again, we all have struggles, man. It doesn't have to be military. It doesn't have to be anything. Day-to-day alcoholism, addiction, financial struggle. I mean, you name it. Just, man, life is hard, bro. Life is hard. It gets you down. But if you know you're loved, if you have this capacity of sharing and giving back and perpetuating that concept, I think you're going to be much better off. I think, in terms of, some additional action items, I would say you've got to be, the hardest thing a human being can do is to be honest with themselves. So that's where it starts. You can't get the love unless you've identified where you are.
Accountability.
You've got to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And once you are honest with yourself, you can then begin that process of loving yourself and then loving others and then, paying it forward. I think if I give you those three, if we could, as a society, do those three things, we're better off. And I think as people are struggling in their day-to-day, if they can identify those three things, get up in the morning and just take a moment to take stock of your situation. Where are you? What can you be doing better? Again, the hardest thing to do is that truth, that self-truth. So if you can do those things, man, we're in a much better place.
Very, very powerful, actionable items. And as you were, talking about know your love, what kept coming to me, because I've been kind of bouncing around what I want to call the podcast, and I've got, different working titles, Unlock the Cage or Open the Cage. And as I was thinking about it, it's more like worth fighting for. Worth
Yeah.
fighting for. Know your love. Know what's worth fighting for.
Yeah. We all have something.
Oh,
we all
man. It's what's really interesting, Lex? Right on the other side of the dark is the light. Bright.
Yeah.
Like it's amazing how close it is.
Yeah.
It's amazing how close it is. For me, the times where I've been honest with myself and I've held myself accountable, held myself to a higher standard, got out of my ego, got out of my narcissism, got out of me and thought about the other person and how much they're hurting and how much they need help. When that happens, I start getting happy. It's the weirdest. I'm like, whoa, is that really what it needed to happen? I needed to get out of my own pain and see someone else's pain. And that, I think, is part of all these organizations that you're a part of and you're giving back to them is lifting you up and it's getting you out of your stuff. Like you're helping the next guy who doesn't know that help is there. For me, I can only speak for me, obviously. Me helping the next guy up makes me happy. It's like that. It is teamwork. It's teamwork, man. It really is. I can't do it without you, and I don't know, man. It's beautiful. I'm still trying to figure it all out. As soon as I start holding myself up, then my ego comes back in again, saying I got this thing figured out. I only know that it feels good to be around people like you, people who have seen the hardship, people who've been on the other side and are working their way out. It inspires me and it makes me say, I got to hold myself to more account. Why am I not getting up at 5 a.m.? What's the story? It's just bullshit. It's always bullshit. Why am I not getting?
There's always a reason, man. You can do. I mean, as a parent, right? You talk with your kids all the time. You try to teach them lessons. So my family is going through a hardship now, and I'm using it as a teachable moment for my 11-year-old and my 9-year-old daughters. And I say, kids, you can allow what's going on in our family environment presently define you, to bring you down, to break you down, to make you sad, to make you angry. But you can choose to be happy, and you can choose to learn important lessons from this that will serve you better on later in life. And look, man, the bottom line is we all go through struggles. If someone says they have never struggled in their life, they're full of shit.
They are.
From that person. Run as fast as you can because they're not being honest with themselves. If they can't be honest with themselves, they sure as hell aren't going to be honest with you.
That's right. That's right. It's one of the preambles to this show, and one of the reasons I'm doing it is it's not a happy Facebook site. Yeah. I'm not putting out the happy Facebook. I'm being honest about my darkness. I'm being honest about my sadness. Sometimes feeling like nothing is worth it. I go, I become nihilistic. Nothing matters. Like I can't get a value, and that's when I go dark like that, it doesn't matter what's going on outside me. I know I need to reach out. And that's why these networks, that's why your texts that you're talking about are so important, is people need to know that they can reach out. If they don't, that's step number one, right? Just it's there, reach out. Then you get a little footing, right? It's like getting a beachhead. It's getting a beachhead on your life, getting a beachhead, getting back to the light, man. You got brothers out there and sisters out there who've been there, and they have a protocol. They've worked their way out, right? It's a path. Like you can see a path. All right, there is a path. I can't see it now. I see nothing now, right? It's pitch black. I can't see anything, but I'm just going to trust. Lex told me there's a couple of paths that help him. I'm just going to trust.
Faith, man.
Yeah.
Having faith.
Yeah.
It's a whole different discussion about how you interpret and embrace faith and what it is, but we all have some level faith in something. can just have faith, you can find the light.
Yeah. Yep. And for me too, getting quiet, sitting on a cushion, and one of my mentors, I think you'll like this. One of my mentors who had a gun in his mouth. His dad was murdered by his dad's business partner for the insurance, and they were big Wall Street heavy cats. I'll introduce you to him. And he did the whole drugs will fix this, alcohol will fix this, womanizing will fix this, the whole thing. He's in Manhattan. He's a good-looking guy. He's got a ton of money, and his dad is murdered. Had the gun in his mouth. He ended up going to Tibet and studied under some great masters. And one of the things he said to me that never left me was, you're sitting on a riverbank and you're watching all these things in the water going by in the river. All those different things that are floating in the water, your thoughts. They're not going to stop all day long, brother. You're going to have 40,000 of them. You don't have to do anything with any of them. You can just watch them and watch them dissipate like the clouds. They're just thoughts. They're nothing. Right. And that was one of my beachheads. So now I'm developing my witness and I'm watching these thoughts going by. So someone yells at me or someone cuts me off. More often than not now, I'm like, dude's hurting or the dude's unconscious. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what we used to do.
Yeah.
In Boston in the 80s and 90s, someone cut you off. That's not what we used to do. Now it's like, dude's hurting. Dude's trying to get his daughter to the hospital, whatever. I'll say whatever.
Right.
But I have more time now in between the stimulus and my Pavlovian drooling. Like when I hear that bell ringing, I'm not drooling as quick. I still fall victim to it, but less and less and less. And that's the meditation.
Sure. As you're headed down that path, you catch yourself and you're like, wait a minute. It helps to center you again.
More and more catches. When my daughter's acting up, more and more catches. Opportunity for practice. OFP, opportunity for practice. Brother, you've been so generous with your time. We're on an hour and a half.
My pleasure, bro.
Hey, if people want to get more information about Titan FC, give us that information, and also, a hero and the Brock Foundation. Anything that people should know about. They want to get in touch with you. What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm easy. Instagram happens to be kind of my favorite medium of communication, just because it's visual. You got the video and all that. So I'm just at Lex McMahon on Instagram. Pretty easy. I'm on Facebook, Lex McMahon, Twitter at Lex McMahon MMA. Titan, we're Titan FC, Titan Fighting Championships. We're easy to find on all those same platforms. And love to hear from you. And A-Hero is just aherousa.org. Check us out.
Thanks for shining the light, brother. You're making a big difference in the world.
All right, my friend. Thank you. All right, see you. Talk soon. Yeah.
For our full schedule of fights on the NBC Sports Network, CW and ABC affiliates, visit UnitedFightAlliance.com. United Fight Alliance. United we fight.